Mr. Beacon podcast is sponsored by Williot.
Welcome to the Mr. Beacon podcast. Back for another exciting trip into the world of IoT. This time we're going out to sea. We're actually going out to sea again. We're making a return visit to an old friend and colleague of mine, Sam Jar, who's the Chief Product Officer at Alpha Ori, who are specializing on bringing IoT to shipping. Sam, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be back on your show. I've been watching some of your recordings. You've been doing amazing with all these recordings. So it's really nice to be back.
Well, we don't often do boat shipping episodes. The last time we did it was 3.5 years ago when you were on the show. And I think this is a fascinating opportunity to see what has changed. I think you were fairly early in your voyage, if you'll pardon the pun. You've probably gone a little bit further. So I'd love to just ask you what has happened since we last met. But before we do that, can you just refresh people's memory for anyone that didn't watch that show 3.5 years ago or listen to it? What does your company do?
So we are a B2B technology company. There's a word called digitalizing. So we are digitalizing the shipping industry. We are bringing the latest technology of big data science, machine learning into shipping industry, which has been operating in an old-fashioned way. And we are taking them to the next level of operation, the way it ought to be managed in the current environment or in the future. So we are digitalizing their entire fleet and taking the ship operation, or bringing ship operation 2.0, you can say.
And what are the problems that you're solving?
So we are, if you look at it, what is ship operation 2.0? Which means transparency, high-end analytics, and bringing productivity and efficiency real time, by having it a real-time communication to these vessels. On a high level, we are doing these three areas we are targeting. And if you see what are the benefits our customers are having, they're having benefits of increased productivity, cost-efficient operations, and dollar savings, because ultimately everything boils down to dollar savings. And not to say, or not the least, is we are also proud of making shipping sustainable in this world where climate change is an impending disaster moving our way. And shipping is a contributor to that. And through our products, we are helping make shipping sustainable as well.
How is what you doing? How is your business being affected by COVID? I'm really interested in this. I hear that there's dozens of massive container ships stuck outside of the port of Los Angeles, that the economy is teetering on hyperinflation because costs are going way up. Is that true? What are you seeing, and how is it affecting your company?
Excellent question, Steve. To be honest, when COVID struck us, we were in a bit of dire straits. We were trying to figure out, given our supply chain and how things move for our own installation all around the world on different vessels, how do we manage it? So that was a question that was the foremost on our mind. And then, will there be enough supply? So let us first talk about how did the COVID impact the shipping industry, and I'll tell you how did it impact us and what we did to mitigate that. So to your point, shipping industry saw a quick slump, but it also saw a V-shaped recovery. When people were sitting at home with this discretionary cash, they didn't want to spend so they ended up buying a lot of things online. So actually the buying dipped, but it went up right away. So there were demands of all these goods coming from Asia, for example, to the United States. So that continued. That didn't stop. So there was a Same thing happened on the tanker industry and the gas industry. The demand dipped for a while, but it came right back up. So that's how it impacted shipping industry. So we see, okay, some slump in demand, but it came right back up. When it came to our industry, what we do is that we install hardware on ships, which collects data or from sensors on the ship. Once we get the data, then it's all on the cloud, which is great. Then we can do whatever we want with the data, for our customers. But initial installation saw a complete stop because our people couldn't fly to China, couldn't fly to Europe, couldn't fly to US to do all these installations. So what we did, we completely revamped the supply chain. So instead of getting the product from Taiwan to India, working on the product, then shipping it along with the people to certain locations, we revamped the entire product. Entire testing was moved, if we can say that. And all the servers and hardwares that was ready in Taiwan got shipped directly to the ships. And now the product is there. How do we install it? So we struck a deal with local people in various ports who will go to the ship. When ship arrives, they'll go to the ship. Hardware already is there. They'll install it. And once they install and the data starts flowing, then it's in our control completely. That's what we did. We created a worldwide web, in a way, of our own installation mechanics. So we have installations in all the ports, and many ports in Asia, in Europe, in US, where people go to the ship, install it, so the data starts flowing. It took us a few months to do all that work, but I tell you how good things happen if you just try. So our capacity of installations went multifold. So if we were able to install, let's say, around 10 ships at the per month prior to COVID, now post COVID, I can install 30 ships per month, and there's no limit to it because it's been made scalable. There are people sitting there, our contractors in different ports ready to install.
That's interesting. We actually experienced something similar. We had this distributed supply chain. We were making tags in Germany, designing them in Israel, and it was very logical doing it that way. But what we were finding was the innovation cycles were taking a long time. And then COVID came, and suddenly we could no longer send people from Israel to Germany to work in the facility of our partner. So we ended up investing in $1 million manufacturing capability, one of these machines that makes the tags that we make, and we set it up in Israel. And suddenly our innovation cycles went from months to weeks. So it's like COVID forced us to re-examine things, and suddenly it's been accelerated. It seems similar to what you just described for you guys. So so that's how COVID has impacted you. How is it impacting the use cases? Is it impacting the use cases that you're being asked to implement?
Absolutely. So as you know, people used to go on the ship to do inspection and many other maintenance activities, all that. So we started to see, when the COVID hit, we saw some cancellations in our contract, immediate dip, because people were trying to preserve cash in the face of uncertainty. But very quickly, we started to see a shift in demand of automation and remote monitoring and remote diagnostics. Because, hey, I cannot have somebody from Japan fly out to Oslo to do this diagnostics. So can I do it remotely? How do I get data remotely? And guess what? That's the sweet spot that we were in, that we can get you live data from anywhere to anywhere and provide you all the analytics that you can get. So this started to roll, the conversation started, and suddenly we saw the drop in customers, it stopped. And in fact, many of the new customers started inquiring about our software, our proprietary product, SmartShip, our platform, that how can we get digital platform on it? And if I get it, can you tell me what the values are? So there is a resurgence of activity, including demands of digitalization of ships and vessels so that things can be done remotely rather than visiting the ship, which was the norm.
So it sounds like COVID forced you to change the way you did deployments and it increased your capacity. It sounded like it forced your customers to be more efficient, which drove demand for your products. What's the constraint? What's the bottleneck in your business that if you had a magic wand, you'd remove in order to scale even faster?
I think that was the question. We were struggling. The moment I was able to scale the installation, because earlier we thought that, we can't hire so many people and we can't fly them out. And that is out of the window right now, which means our installation capability has gone up. So what is stopping it? Despite all those changes that we made, there is some limitation still there, which means you have to organize the hardware arrival on the ship, and then somebody has to go there to install. So now imagine a ship sailing from Rotterdam to Brazil. And we say, okay, we are ready to ship it, but now we got to wait until it reaches Brazil. And guess what? We don't want to ship it in Brazil because there is a very high tax there. So let's wait till it comes back to Rotterdam. Now, suddenly you are 45 days behind or 30 days behind, depending on the speed of the vessel. So the question started to come, can we build a product where we take the hardware installation element completely out? Now, of course, as you know, IoT would require a certain amount of installation so that it can connect to sensors and take data. So we are now working on a product which will not do all the things that is done by a SmartShip Professional, which is our flagship product. But some of the high demand applications from that package can be done completely without hardware installation. That means we collect the public data, merge with some private data, and make it a software-only product for those specific applications. We are in the middle of developing that software, which will go live in second half of this year. And that installation can happen, 300 ship installation in 1 month, because it's a software-only product solving specific needs, not the complete digitalization, but solving specific needs of companies who are looking to enhance their profitability and fuel savings.
And then give me a few examples of what those needs are that you can solve without the hardware. And then what I'd like to do is ask you how that then, what are the extra things you can do when you add the hardware? But I think this is super important. It doesn't apply it goes beyond ships. It's like infrastructure, hardware is the thing that slows you down, and slowing scaling is obviously the enemy of any business, any startup especially. So what is it that you can do? What can you deliver? What are the benefits you can deliver without hardware? And then what does the hardware let you do after that?
Sure. So when you look at the commercial side of shipping, one of the biggest problems they struggle with is that how do I maximize the asset or maximize the profit from this asset? And in order to know that, you would want to know it's called TCE, one of the very common word in shipping that is called total charter equivalent, which says, if I make a trip, how fast can I make or how slow can I make? And what is the difference between earning per day that I will have, either moving too fast or moving too slow. Because as you move too fast, you're going to burn more fuel, as you know. And you move too slow, you're going to take more time to reach the port. So given the market condition, what are the factors that I should consider to maximize the earning per day vessel? So that is something we can solve by our new product. It's called Smart Voyager, by the way. We can solve by giving them the options that if you want to maximize fuel saving or maximize earning per day, you can have that calculation, and based on your given condition, you can make a call. For example, I don't have any charter waiting for me. Once I complete the voyage, that means I'll be sitting idle over there. So guess what? I'm going to go slow and maximize my fuel saving, which is the highest expense on the vessel. And if I have charter waiting, the market is hot, then can I spend more money on fuel, reach fast, deliver it, and grab onto next charter? What does it do to earning per day on my asset? So these problems, we are using lots of codes, many public data, and individualized ship data coming from shore, coming from the ship, even though lesser frequency than what SmartShip can give us. And we can merge all that in the code to provide these decision support system to our customers and let them make the call based on their condition, what they want to do. So this we can provide right now without having to install hardware. Now to your second question, what else can you do if you install hardware? And if we install hardware, now we can do much more than this application, right? We can do predictive maintenance that we are doing on many of the vessels. We are catching anomalies which prevents failures and thereby reducing breakdown, saving on spare parts. At the same time, we are extending the overhauling period of many machineries by showing the health score and the data, how good the machinery is performing. So you do not need to do it at 8,000 hours, which has been prescribed in the manual. You can extend it to 10,000 hours. So for doing these things, it cannot be done without getting the sensor data directly from the ship, and we'll have to install hardware. That's another example of what additional things we can do by having hardware installed. Then comes notification. And so on. We can talk more about that. Is that how can we get on-time notifications for when you're crossing in a hazardous zone, when you're getting data which is matching or which is a wayward data compared to where it should be. So there are many other applications of having hardware on board, but there is a good amount of benefit to be had from the software, which people can quickly be trained on, which can be rolled on at a faster level at a large number of vessels. And keep in mind, some of our customers, they say, I'm going to charter a ship for only 3 months or 1 month. I do not have time for you to take 3 months or 2 months to come and install everything, hardware and this and that, because I may not have that ship after 3 months. I may decide to let it go. So can you give me something which I can roll in like 1 day or 2 days with training, and it goes on? So that's another area we are looking at.
I got to ask you, what is a hazardous zone? Are we talking pirates or what?
When it comes to hazardous zone, then yes, piracy, the bad weather. At the same time, there are certain zones called environmental compliance zones. Those are not hazardous, those are safe zones. But when you enter those safe zones, you ought to be burning certain kinds of fuel. You cannot be polluting that zone. So around the US, for example, we have this environmental compliance area that before the vessel can enter, they must change over the fuel to go to low sulfur fuel. Otherwise, they'll be penalized by the coast authorities.
Fascinating. You touched on some things that give me an opportunity to do IoT buzzword bingo. You talked about analytics in the cloud, and I'm going to tick the machine learning AI buzzwords. I'm assuming that's part of your portfolio. Where are you actually finding AI is able to really add value versus just being part of buzzword bingo?
Sure, sure. Yes, I agree with it. That is a buzzword like nowadays. Everybody's talking about it. You talk about any business, they're doing it, right? So let's understand the AI. What is artificial intelligence? Let's spend a minute on this one. So when we talk about AI, the first thing that flashed into our mind, at least few people's mind, not everyone, is those movies you've seen from Hollywood, right? A Terminator trying to terminate someone, and they think like humans, and they can outthink you because the machine could be more powerful and all that. That level of AI is very, very, very far away. We're not talking that level of AI. We're not talking singularity, that's for sure. Mr. Lakhani, a Harvard professor of ours, he calls it a strong AI. He said, okay, let's redefine AI. Let's call that strong AI. What is happening all around the world on AI right now is automation of certain tasks which were earlier performed by humans, but now no longer need humans in that chain. And that's all AI is doing right now. And let's call this a weak AI, for example. That's what he calls it. Dr. Lakhani calls it weak AI. And that has tremendous amount of value. One example you can say, Ant Financial, which deploys it, that you can apply for certain loan. No human is in between to approve that loan. It gets approved based on various data that it collects and your ability to pay. And that entire calculation happens based on AI. So tomorrow, if a large number of people from your profile not your profile, my profile, I'm just giving an example, it starts failing on delivering that loan or meeting their obligations, the algorithm automatically adjusts the score and moves the certificate approval process for a higher score. This is all being done without human being in place. And that's the kind of AI we are talking about. So in our case, where we are using AI, for example, in predictive maintenance, the algorithm learns, it is trained for 3-4 months with the data, which we give supervised learning. It learns that machine and say, okay, at various conditions, this is how machine should be performing. But if there is an anomaly, if the generator is running at half the load, it should not have, let's say every other cylinder is giving me exhaust temperature of 270 and one of them gives 320. At that load, there'll be no alarm sounding because let's say alarm is set for 370. You would not notice it, but but our algorithm finds the anomaly that why this is based on the historical data and pattern. This is anomalous to that, and let's call it out. Let's raise an alert and provide effective things that the maintenance guy can perform to check what are the possibilities for this to happen. So it thinks like a chief engineer, and that's how we are able to bring AI into our predictive maintenance algorithm to achieve certain tasks which only a human could decipher earlier. Our algorithm is deciphering and aiding you in your decision.
So that's reassuring. The AI is not going to kill us. I don't know whether it's going to remove jobs. I think it's kind of inevitable. I don't think there's anything we can do to stop these efficiencies. So last question, where are things headed? What's next for Alpha Ori? Where are you going?
We are headed to have the success that we are looking for. But before I tell you where we are headed, one of the things that I wanted to just tell, the various learnings that we've had. We started this with a big vision, big dreams, and many of the dreams have become successful or as we had dreamt. But at the same time, there are so many challenges that were thrown our way, or either we didn't anticipate it came our way, natural or man-made, whichever way you can say. The one thing that I would say that one of the learning for us in startup is that nothing goes as planned, right? You should be able to get what the hands you're dealt with and how you adapt to it. How quickly you can come back with a solution to either unseen challenge or newly present challenges. That has been a fun element sometime, frustrating element other times. But that has been one learning, that one should always be prepared for unexpected in any startup. I mean, it can go for any business, but the uncertainty can have much more impact when you're trying to just establish yourself. It could become existential question. And we deal with so many existential questions. We dealt with it in the beginning. Now, as we have more and more customers, we have more stability and things have kind of calmed down a little. But if anybody's doing a startup, they should think about it, that yes, there will be many existential questions that will come our way, and that we'll have to deal with it for sure. Now, going to where we are headed to, just by numbers, if I can see, we did 100 ships last year. We are looking to do 250 new smart ships on top of the 100 by end of this year. So we are targeting 350 smart ships in 2021. We are on track to deliver 450 ShipPalm, which is our ERP product, on 450 vessels. And we are on target to exceed our revenue target for this year. This is all looking or heading in the right direction for sure, despite all those challenges. But aspirationally, where I want to be in 1 year time or year and a half time, where I'm able to convert non-believers into believers in digital transformation. And that's where we want Alphaori to succeed in a way where it not only inspires us who work for it, but inspires some of those non-believers to see the success of digital transformation of their own organization and take up that journey. That's where we'd want to be aspirationally.
So it sounds like you basically want to move from maybe the early majority to the late majority to start getting some of the people that aren't the forward-looking ones. Hopefully you'll have the metrics, the success that will convince people who don't care about the technology, never heard of IoT, inherently skeptical of machine learning, to just do it because their colleagues are doing it and they're saving money, making money, and they want to do the same.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah, that'll go a long way in making this, not only this company successful, which we are on our way, but making this industry successful, making this industry sustainable for our globe. So yeah, that's our aspirational goal, and we're looking forward to continuing that journey.
Wonderful. Well, more power to you, Sam. Congratulations on the success in the face of adversity. Thank you very much for staying in touch, coming back on the show. Thank you for using the word existential. I think you're the first person to use that on the show. I think you just raised the kind of cachet of the show by your vocabulary. Some great insights that I think go beyond shipping into broad IoT. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Steve. As always, it's a pleasure to be with you on the show or off the show. It's always a pleasure to interact with you. I always learn something new when I talk to you. So thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Very good. Well, this week's episode was brought to you by Jesse Hazelrig, who's our producer, and Nelson Fernandez, who's our editor. My son is still working at Starbucks 1 year in, so I want to thank them for their program for supporting young adults with autism. It's amazing. And lastly, I want to thank you, our listeners, our viewers, for your loyalty. And I'm impressed. You made it almost to the end of this episode. Please do tell your friends, colleagues, rate us on whatever platform you're using to watch or listen to us. And I look forward to seeing you next time. So, Sam, tell me a little bit about your career. I think I tend to interview people with interesting jobs. I think you've got an interesting job. It's probably people who want your job or a job like it. How did you get started? Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in India, and then after having done engineering work for about 5-6 years, then I came here for a master's to the US. And then interestingly enough, I did an internship in a telecom company, even without any prior knowledge of telecom. And they gave me an offer before I even went back to work, went back to finish my last year in school. They gave me an offer. And I decided to join them right after graduation. So it worked out well from that point of view. Telecom was hot that time. In 1996, they had done the deregulation of telecom in the US. And there were so many companies. So I just got lucky to be in a hot company by any standard at that time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And having worked there for a few years, decided to move to West Coast because we had some family here. And I just happened to apply in Qualcomm, got an interview. Interview went well, but before even I could get an offer, my wife was pushing me to get a job in West Coast because she saw the beautiful weather of San Diego. She's like, "This is where we ought to be."
Yeah.
So it worked out. Got a job with Qualcomm, and in fact, I could say not one, but there were so many jobs at Qualcomm that I changed my career every 2-3 years. About 10 years in Qualcomm there. By the time I was actually ready to leave Qualcomm, or I was doing well, I thought, but I had a very interesting offer to join a startup, or in fact, start a startup with some investors. And this had been my lifelong dream to work in a startup. So what could be better opportunity where the investors come your way?
Sorry, I had to interrupt you. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's an amazing opportunity. I want to pause because you're like moving forward rapidly. And we could spend a lot of time talking about all the jobs that you did. But so you were working at Qualcomm for 10 years, which is a long time in high tech. But it wasn't just one job, it was many jobs. How do you get to a point where investors in a startup are coming to you? Because that doesn't happen to most people. How did it happen to you?
Well, it happened for two reasons. One, that the investor became a friend because we climbed Kilimanjaro together. So he came to know me over there. I came to know him. We became good friends. And then he found out that I had spent about 6 years prior to coming to telecom. I had spent 6 years in shipping. So I knew that very well, that industry that he came from. So we had too much in common. And then we kept talking for a few years about some interesting opportunities happening in shipping industry. And that's when he proposed to, do a startup with us.
So this is an important thing. So did you know someone who was an investor and then persuade them to climb Kilimanjaro with you? Or were you climbing Kilimanjaro and met an investor who happened to have a set of common interests in the background?
Well, we had a common friend. So one of my classmates who was vice president in Twitter, he was my undergrad classmate. And that was the common thread between the investor and me. And that's how I got to know. That's how we were on the same trip, because it was organized by my friend, who was a common friend. He organized the trip to go to Kilimanjaro, and then I met him for the first time on the trip.
All right. This sounds like it's going to be very hard for other people to replicate. Find a friend who knows someone who's an investor and then arrange to climb a very high mountain with them. Probably just, maybe we distill it down to networking and maintaining relationships and not being just work focused. Do you think the climb had something to do with your relationship burgeoning, the fact that you did this difficult, dangerous thing together?
Absolutely, because mountaineering is something that is even in some of the MBA classes they encourage people to take up. Is that what is mountaineering? Mountaineering is setting a very high goal for yourself, that I'm going to climb a very high mountain, not getting intimidated by the task, plan it accordingly, and take one step at a time towards that ultimate goal. And before you know, you're on top of it. So if you're going to think about how am I going to go to the 20,000 foot mountain, you're going to get intimidated. So you plan it out and you say, all I'm going to think about it today, what I'm going to do, and what is my next task, go towards, take next action towards that goal, which is the next step. Put one foot ahead of the next foot and keep moving.
So that makes total sense. So if you want to meet overachievers, you need to do things that overachievers do. And clearly, versus, I don't know, sitting back watching episode 50 of The Sopranos, which is what I was doing last night, you decided you were going to climb a mountain. And who are you likely to meet? You're going to meet interesting people. It's a no-lose proposition other than the obvious physical peril. Okay, so you climbed the mountain. How far did you get on the mountain? We
did the summit. I have a nice photograph. I can send it to you. We did the summit. In fact, there were 19 of us in that group, and each one of us summited. So this was the organizer's goal, that many of the first-time climbers, his goal was, how can I take a group of people who are not into it, who are not experts, some of them have not done it, but the goal is here to all of us to summit, to help each other during the journey, motivate each other, help each other to make sure we all finish the goal together. That was the purpose. And that guy who's the common friend is our CEO now in the company.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, so do send me the photograph. Normally we have these very nicely airbrushed business portraits, people striking a pose, which I like, kind of. But we'll have a picture of you on top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and people will wonder, why on earth have they got that as their thumbnail? And then hopefully they'll figure out and appreciate it. Yeah, I remember doing something not probably quite as impressive, but we went on a team building course back in the day when companies invested in that, and I was a manager of a team, and we went to the Lake District in England, and we had to climb up a waterfall, and the instructor kind of got it wrong, and there'd been heavy rainfall just before we went up, and so we were like, it turned into a life and death situation. And then we got lowered down a cliff. We were rappelling down a cliff into a cave, which was like enormously claustrophobic, jumping off a ledge in the cave into pitch black, landing into a lake. And the only way to get out was through a sump, where you basically have to go. We could see the light coming out from under the water. We had to dive down and come up. By the time we'd been through that, it was an amazing bonding experience. It really, it all came out, all of the tensions that maybe you can bottle up and not express, that it all came out. But we were bonded so well. I still keep in touch with the people in that team. All
Absolutely.
right,
What a
very
story.
good. Wow. Thank you, Sam. Great to hear that. I guess, before we move on though, so you got together, and then how did you figure out who was going to do what in this company that you were starting up?
Excellent. So what happens, like in any startup, right? Few of you get together and he said, this is the task we're going to do. And then we talk about, okay, what do you bring to the table? Where we can maximize the qualities or the skills that you have or an individual possesses in that team. So we looked at it. We said there was a guy, ex-Cisco, ex-Ruckus Wireless. He had been in engineering for a long time, so he's going to do a CTO or engineering / head of engineering role. That was no-brainer. At that time, the first goal was that, okay, who can take this new vision to market? Who can bring this new vision, create a product out of it to meet that vision and take it to market? So since I was the first employee officially in that organization, Alpha Ori Technologies, which it is called, so I became kind of head of business, so chief business officer, chief product officer, who's also writing the PRDs, and anything else that had to be done. So basically, we have all wore multiple hats. And that's why my first title was Chief Business Officer and Chief Product Officer, doing both. As we grew a little bit, there's another fellow from Singapore joined us, and then I gave up my business responsibility, and he became kind of head of sales. So there wasn't a clear distinction upfront who should do why. We basically said, okay, who has the skill set to start it, and which piece of the work do you want to take up? So obviously, in my experience, I've had multiple experiences in different roles. So I raised my one hand, two hand, or whatever, wherever the gaps we found, we raised a hand and we picked it up.
Very cool. Well, that's really interesting insight into how this startup came to be. Thank you, Sam.
Sure.